Good afternoon, folks. My name is Jimmy Bashara with the ISO Stakeholder Affairs Group. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Demand Response Customer Partnership Group. Customer Partnership Groups, as you know, were created in response to customers' requests to have more involvement in the planning, design, and usability validation phases of ISO application development. They provide an open and interactive partnership forum to identify potential opportunities to improve the overall customer experience. So your input, ideas, and opinions through this forum is very much appreciated. With that, I will go ahead and introduce the ISO colleagues with me here today. I see we have Jill.
Yes, hi, Jill Powers from our Infrastructure and Regulatory Policy Group.
Thanks, Jill. Huwaida.
Hi, everyone. This is Huwaida from the Models and Contracts Implementation Group.
Thanks, Huwaida. Bill?
Hi, this is Bill Weaver from Kaiser Legal.
Thanks, Bill. Indu?
Hi, everyone. This is Indu Nambiar from the technology side.
Thanks so much, Indu. And Elaine?
Hi, this is Elaine Siegel from Model and Contracting Implementation.
Thanks, Elaine. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jill to kick us off.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jimmy, and thank you, everybody, for joining our call today. Jimmy did mention how we've used customer partnership working groups in the past. I think today's working group is really going to be more informational. I know at least I've been involved in the use of these working groups when we're getting into implementation detail for stakeholder initiatives. What we're going to be discussing today are things that we have not had a stakeholder initiative on, but that we have been working on, optionalities that are already available to us within the tariff for demand response participation. So today we're going to cover some of the issues of undervaluation of DR performance that we've heard based on last summer's heat wave. We're going to be going over a couple options that the ISO has been considering to address these issues that have been presented to us. And there are two different options that we have been exploring. One is the use of a comparison and control group methodology, and the second is establishing what's necessary for the use of load adjustment factors outside of a min-max cap for the summer of 2021. And really, it's the second track that we're really going to focus most of our attention to and discussion on this call. But I did want to make aware of our DR stakeholders of this additional option under a track one of something that the ISO is pursuing for the summer as well. So of the track two option, we're really going to start looking at the details of how our stakeholders can obtain approval for the use of different minimum max adjustments. And we'll go into detail on how to go about getting that approval, including the request process, some of the conditions under which these are we're setting out for approval. And then just to let you know that there is going to be updates to our DR business practice manual to reflect these. And the last item that we will get into is some of the detail, and I guess we could mention it as implementation detail of this option. And it's about data submission and some requirements, again, as condition of approval that would be required for this request, under this request. And then how stakeholders will utilize the MRIS system for this new data submission. And we'll give you some examples to kind of clarify what we're talking about and how this will affect these data submissions. And lastly, just open questions and conversation of what the next steps might be for our stakeholders. So if we go on to our next section, we're going to get right into the presentation. And this section is really just a little bit of information about ISO's demand response evaluation methodology. So on the next slide, ISO does support 3 baseline types for demand response supply side resource performance measurements, and they are control groups, day matching, and weather matching performance methodologies. And each of these are established within our TERA. It is the day matching and weather matching performance methodologies that utilize the adjustment factors with CAPs. So when we're talking about this request for changes to the adjustment factors, it's really specific to the use of the day matching and weather matching performance methodologies. However, because we have control groups that are supported, the secondary option the first option, the track 1 option that we talked to, does focus on the use of control groups. Again, all of these are within our tariff, and so we don't have to do any changes to our tariff to reflect these options for the summer. So go on to our next. So this is really pretty much the issue or the issue statement of what we have been hearing from our integrated demand response providers. Our providers have articulated that there has been significant undervaluation of demand response during and the valuation of that demand response during the August 14th through 19th heat events. And there has been specific focus and identification that this can be attributed to the current day and weather matching baseline's use of the adjustment caps, which are set at 40% for our non-residential customers that are utilizing this, and 20% for our, non-residential is 20% and 40% for our residential customers utilizing the day matching baseline methodology. And we have heard that the actual deliveries were outside of these and much greater when these caps were lifted and when they were not calculated using these adjustment caps. So there is a recognition by the ISO and other agencies that this does have an effect on both the energy and capacity compensation. And for the ISO, it's really about energy compensation and the impact that it had with respect to the energy compensation given to these resources participating in the market. There is recognition that there's also a QC evaluation component to this, as well as a DRAM contract, demand response auction mechanism contract evaluation by the utility about the use of ISO baseline methodology, and which it incorporates this cap. So if we go on to the next slide, again, I did want to introduce the specific track 1, in which this option in which the ISO is exploring and piloting the expanded use of a comparison or control group methodology. In our baseline working group 2017 baseline working group study that we did as part of our energy storage and distributed energy resource phase 2, control groups were found to outperform both the day and weather matching baselines. However, even when we incorporated that into our tariff, there was a recognition that this option may not be available for many of our third-party demand response provider stakeholders due to the lack of having a sufficiently large customer base to develop a control group. So for this summer, the ISO has contracted with a company called Recurve to conduct analysis on the viability of accessing a control group and accessing data to be utilized as a comparison or control group by all DRPs. This is a part or as a result of work that this company has done on a comparison methodology used in a Department of Energy pilot. So based on the results of that and the comparative and analysis that was done comparing this comparison methodology against the available ISO's current baseline methodologies, and the differences that were shown for the 2020 summer season. That is why we had reached out and are working with Recurve on this analysis. And this analysis, this contract has begun, and this will be happening over the summer of 2021. And this evaluation, the review that we will have based on this contract is something that we're looking at for a longer-term solution on opening up this control group methodology and making it available to all of our demand response participants. So that's really all I'm going to touch upon in today's call on this. If there are questions on this, I would ask that you could reach out to me directly at jpowers@caiso.com or and I can give you additional information on where this particular track is going. It is at very initial stages, so I don't have a lot of detail at this point, but I can give an overview of additional information if you're interested. So if we move on to the next slide, this is where we're really going to talk about the main discussion for today, which is allowing for the use of this alternate load adjustment factor cap ratio, specifically for the months of May through October in this summer season of 2021. Currently, we do have a tariff authority for DRPs to request the use of a different load adjustment factor. So what we are doing for this summer is to really lay out the conditions for approval of these requests so that we can have an efficient means by which they can be requested and then approved without a large amount of justification, upfront justification as to the request and the request for an approval. As mentioned, there will be conditions for approval, and we'll lay that out. These conditions will be established, have been established, and they are going to be included in the changes we're going to make to the demand response business practice manual. As mentioned, this is for eligibility for the May through October trade months of this summer. The one condition of approval is that the request and the approval must occur prior to the beginning of the month. As an example, if you were to request for the use of this for the months of June to September, the ISO would have to have received and approved the request prior to June 1st. And this is an important factor as we're getting close to the May time frame, and so it's going to take some action, quick action on our stakeholders' parts to get those requests in if you would like to use this for May. And finally, as a condition of approval, there's going to be a requirement for the submission of additional data from our demand response providers using this option. And the reason for this additional data is this will allow for the ISO to do further analysis on the impact of the load adjustment factor and its use with the performance methodology, specifically for the summer months in which it will be used. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Huwaida, who is now going to get into some of the detail of this. Huwaida?
Hello, everyone. Again, this is Helena. And like Jill mentioned, I'll be going over the updates to the demand response BPM. We'll go over the request form, as well as the approval process for the load cap adjustment requirement. Next slide. Oh, no, they're good. So like stated here, we have captured, to help capture the request, we have an update to the demand response BPM through Appendix G that you are all able to review later. We've also created a request form that you will need to submit to the ISO to be approved. We'll talk about where the form is located. We'll also go over the additional data submittal requirements that are needed for this process. Next, please. Okay, so starting first, we'll go over the request process. Next. So first, you can find the load cap adjustment request form on the CAISO webpage under the demand response and load site. Like stated on the form, you can follow the what's stated for the direct location for this form. To complete this form, you'll need to include the point of contact information for both the DRP as well as your SC. You'll need to include the resource ID information as well as specify the requested trade month. Once you complete this form, you'll need to submit it. You'll need to email the form over to the PDR inbox. We require 5 business days to approve the form. And like Jill had stated earlier, requests need to be received prior to the first of the month in order to qualify for that trade month. Once you receive the form, we'll review it and then execute the form using DocuSign. And the process is for months of May through October. So for the May trade month, you'll need to submit the request form no later than Friday, April 23rd, which is tomorrow. So I think I'm going to pause right here and see if anyone has any questions before we move on to the next thing, which is talking about the new data requirements. I'm guessing you have no questions.
Thanks, Helena. As a reminder for folks, please push #2 for any questions.
We do appear to have several questions in the queue at this time. First caller, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Stefan Nagy from LEAP. I guess my question, so first, thank you for providing this information and providing the option to request an adjustment to the day of adjustment factor for the summer 2021. We really appreciate it. I just have a question on the implementation of the request form. Could you provide a little bit more detail on what information is provided in the request form? Is it just a standard form, and then if you submit it, it gets approved for a standard baseline adjustment? Is it like a custom request? Just maybe a little bit more information on the request process would be useful.
Of course. So the request form is fairly simple. There's 3 sections you'll need to complete. The first one is provide us all of the contact information. Like I said, scheduling coordinator as well as the demand response provider. Second segment, you'll need to list out the resource IDs, the performance evaluation methodology that's used for that resource ID, as well as select the months the trade months that are being requested, so May through October. And then finally, section 3 is to go over the CAISO terms and conditions for the request approval. You'll need, once that's completed, you'll simply email it over to the PDR at CAISO inbox, and we will process the approval straight through DocuSign.
Okay, that'll make sense. But then I guess is there a standard amount by which the adjustment factor gets revised? Like how does that all get determined?
I think I will.
Curious.
I'll let Jill chime in to that.
Yeah, first off, maybe we can at least show, I don't know, Jimmy, if there's a way that we could, and Elaine could show the actual request form. That might be helpful because that will kind of show what the information that you're going to have to provide. What is being requested is just the use of, during that period of time, a calculated load point adjustment that may be outside of the current minimum ratios that are within the tariff, the 40% and the 20%. So the approval is basically allowing for the use of any load point adjustment during that period of time. So there's not a request for a specific cap. It's just during this period of time, as we're calculating our load point adjustment, we're going to use it. And that is one of the reasons why we're asking for this additional data requirement, is to understand, based on the events that are occurring throughout this summer, based on the weather conditions that are occurring during the summer, what the impact is on the load point adjustment. Is that helpful?
Okay, got it. So yeah, that's perfect. So it basically just removes the cap altogether and allows you to calculate it based on whatever the load point adjustment factor calculation would provide, and then we would provide data on what that is, how that's being implemented throughout the summer.
Right, because we anticipate that there will be periods in which it's not exceeding the cap, and then there may be periods where it does exceed the cap. So we want to see all of that information. We'd like to kind of analyze what we're seeing throughout the month, throughout these months.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you. That's it for my question.
Thanks, and thanks, Jill. I just sent out the link to the form as well for folks in the chat, so just FYI.
I'm just wondering if it would be helpful to review it here, the actual form.
So I do have the form up. If you give me control, I can bring it up on the screen.
Okay, yeah. Operator, would you mind passing the presenting rights over to Elaine?
Elaine, you should have the presenting rights. We do have 2 other questions in the queue.
Okay, we're good for questions, as Elaine's bringing up the form.
All right, next caller, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, Jill. It's John Anderson from Connect. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Great. Thank you. I just want to echo Stefan's comments for this flexibility. It's much appreciated. I just have a couple quick process questions, I hope. The first concerns Section 2 in the form, the PDR, RDRR resources requesting use. I'm curious if a provider has a large number of resource IDs, if the ISO is expecting or requiring those are all listed on individual rows in this table where it indicates that additional rows may be added, or if that could instead be provided as an attachment or an appendix to the form, especially if many or all of the resources are requesting exactly the same treatment or apply to the same month, the same performance evaluation methodology and so forth. So that's the first question, just looking for the easiest pathway, both from the provider side and from the ISO side.
I think for one thing, John, yes, we can have it in an appendix. It's just the format in which we would like to see. As you're mentioning, if you do have a set of resource IDs that have the same performance evaluation methodology, all using the same performance evaluation methodology, as well as selecting all the same applicable months, I think you could put that on one line. You don't have to completely list them out.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I just wasn't sure if the ISO would be processing these somehow in an automated fashion versus manually, and if that could cause an error. Could you remind me?
I better confirm that with Hueda. So she was the developer of the form. That would be okay.
You can either attach an appendix to your form, or if it's clear to list them all out in one line, you can do so as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And can you remind me as well, Jill, where we can confirm the performance evaluation methodology for a particular resource ID? Which CAISO system records that information?
The DRRS application?
Yes, allowing Hueda to answer that.
Thank you. And then the last question is just, once we've completed this form, is the final step to submit it to the ISO, and is the ISO going to route it back to the DR provider and the scheduling coordinator for signature via DocuSign?
That's correct.
Great. Thank you. Those are all of my questions.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next caller. Caller, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, Jill. This is Noor from Olivine. Thanks for your answers to the last questions. That was helpful. Just want to clarify that we're only talking about the ceiling, right? Not there wouldn't be any changes to the floor of the adjustment cap.
I think we are, I mean, it is applicable to both the minimum and maximum.
So if we submit this request, then we would also, so there would be a downside risk if you're at the floor or below the floor, below the 80% or 71%.
That is a good question. It is for both those established values.
So it would just be, sorry, go ahead. I just want to be clear then that it would just be removing both boundaries, and it would just be the raw adjustment factor then that we would be using?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
I think I do want to confirm with Bill whether or not that would be an option, just to have it on the max value and not establish it outside both the min and max.
Yeah, I guess it would, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I really haven't thought about what would be the compelling reasons not to. And I'm wary of doing so on the fly on this call.
Okay, then can you just have some kind of communication on that piece of it, on the minimum cap? If there, I mean, I think my assumption now is that we'd just be completely removing it, but if there's any additional clarifications there, that would be helpful.
Okay. I think, you know, in terms of the title here, we are saying this is use of adjustment factors outside of these established minimum and maximum values. So if we need to add some clarification, you'll have the opportunity in the BPM PRR process. If you don't think that that's clear enough in the BPM process, we can make adjustments to that. And, you know, if you see any needs and changes within this actual form for which you're assigning, you can kind of give us some feedback on that.
Noted.
Thank you very much. We have one more question in the queue. Caller, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, Jill. This is Mike McGuffin from CES. Just some additional feedback on the form. It seems like it might be, just from an administration perspective, it might be easier to simply list SCIDs and resource IDs that would not be included in the cap removal, and that accomplishes a couple of things. But I think primarily, I think most of the DRPs have quite a few resource IDs, and when new resource IDs are created, unless they're specifically to be excluded, no new form would be required. So if possible, I think doing this at the SCID level and just assuming everything is included unless otherwise explicitly referenced, I think would be the preference, if possible.
I think one of the issues with that is we are attempting to obtain information on this form about the performance evaluation methodology that is being utilized by these resource IDs. So just we do want to have that within this form, and that's why we're requesting it for the actual resource IDs that will be utilizing it. And there is a recognition that there are a number of resource IDs that are used, but we also understand that many of these resource IDs, while activated in the master file, are not actually bidding in on a monthly basis. So there was hope that this would also identify those that will be actively bidding in during these months, and as this process allows, it could be a request on a monthly basis. So there's would be, an understanding of those resources that would be requesting it for a specific month and that would be actively bidding within that month.
And Jill, just to add on to that, you had mentioned that, the caller had mentioned that, as the months go on, there'll be new resource IDs. You can always submit additional request forms for those additional resource IDs that you'll then process and have noted. That's the request form is coming for.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I missed the answer to the prior question on where this would be, where the identifier would be located for each resource ID. It was mentioned DRRS, but is there going to be a new field in DRRS where that cap, unlimited cap adjustment is like a checkbox, or how is that going to be displayed?
It won't be displayed within the registration system. There's no changes to the registration system. What we are indicating is that's the means by which you can determine what your performance evaluation methodology is for that resource ID.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's just, I'm trying to, just from a process perspective, I think, that just tracking what resources were exempted, it seems like it all may track back to just a paper document, or obviously a DocuSign copy, but it doesn't. I'm just trying. I'm envisioning quite a few request forms and potentially different months for different resources, and I think for the most part that the performance evaluation methodologies are going to be fairly consistent between DR end-use categories, so I wouldn't envision too many variations. And please correct me if I'm wrong in that assumption, but it seems like it's pretty well split between residential and C&I, and maybe some variation flavors of C&I, but it just seems like if we could go with the route of making the assumption simplistic from the beginning, we could still provide you with the information necessary, have better tracking, and still be able to accomplish what we're all trying to achieve.
I guess we could thank you for that. The feedback. We recognize this will require some manual processing, and this will require manual processing on the DRP's, SC's end. It's something that we can implement very quickly through this process for this summer. If we're to have more automated tracking capability, more automated to make it most effective and efficient, which we would love to be able to do, we definitely wouldn't have it available for this summer. So I think we just ask for everybody's understanding of us attempting to move this quickly and implement this quickly with what we have available and can meet in the short period of time.
Yeah, I think I'm not arguing with that. I think we're in a great agreement on that. I think just approaching it from an exception perspective versus listing everything that's to be included would be easier to administer on your end and more easily tracked if you have to go back and validate which resource was to be included versus not, and trying to track that down on an exception basis, I would think would be the lesser number of resources, so it'd be easier to administer on your end. And that's just assuming that most resources are probably likely to participate in this. So I'll let others ask questions. Like I said, working from an exception basis, I think would be easier to administer.
All right, thank you so much. We do have one more caller in the queue. Do we have time for more questions?
Oh, yes.
All right. Caller, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Stefan from LEAP again. Just one more follow-up on the data submissions. You had mentioned about submitting additional data through MRS. Could you just expand on that a little bit more?
Oh, yeah, we will. It's coming up.
Okay, great.
If you want to actually,
I can wait.
Yeah. Sorry, if you want to swing back to presenting rights to me, I think that now would be a good juncture for that. Thanks.
Do we have any more questions about the form?
It doesn't appear there's any other questions. I
think I just want to re-stress what Hueda has here at the very bottom, because this is very, time is of the essence for those that may want to use this option for the month of May. So just be aware of this timeline.
Okay, we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. So now we'll talk about the new data submittal requirements. And next slide. Okay, so like mentioned, we do have additional as well as new data submittal requirements that are a condition for approval for this adjustment factor use for months of May through October. On your screen, you can see there are 4 changes to the DR meter monitoring data submission. Under the base measurement type, first you'll need to provide measurement data for 4 hours before as well as 4 hours after the hour for which a bid is submitted. That's different to what you're currently doing, which is for the 1 hour, which is bid. The second is you'll need to include a % residential values for the data being submitted, and later on we'll show you an example of what that looks like. For the CVL measurement type, it's similar to the base one. You'll also need to provide data for the day of the DR event, in addition to the data being provided for the 90 days prior. And again, the second thing is including the % residential values for the data being submitted. And again, like I said, we'll show it later on. Next slide, please. So we have it laid out here for you. This table is also included in the Appendix G of the BPM. It goes over the new requirements for the base as well as the CVL measurement types. And you'll see the difference between what the current requirements are as well as the new requirements per resource ID. Next slide, please. So for day matching combined performance methodology, resources utilizing that methodology, there are new data submission requirements. And like listed here in this table, for the base type, measurement type, on an hourly granularity, you'll need to submit the % of the calculated customer load baseline value used to derive the trend attributed to residential customer load baseline. And for the CVL measurement type, you'll need the % of underlying load for day of event and 90 days historically serving residential customers. And all of this information, the new data as well as the additions to the base and CVL measurement types will be submitted using NRIS following the meter data submittal timeline. And there's been a modification to the XSC to include that additional element of the % residential. Going on to the next slide, we'll show you an example of that additional field that is being added to the new XSC. And I guess now we can open it up for questions for anything related to the new data submittals that are being asked of you. Do you have any questions in the queue?
Not currently. So once again, that's pressing #2 will put you in the question queue. That's #2 on your telephone keypad.
I think, Kaweda, we can go over a little bit, if it helps, this example, which is kind of laying out both the new information that's required as well as the expanded data that's required. As an example, for the measurement type of base, when we're showing the market bids for hour ending 16 and 17, previously the information preceding that, the 4 hours information preceding that, and after those hours wasn't something that was required. With this option, as a condition of the approval, that is the expanded amount of data that is going to be required for base. In addition, the new information that's going to be required is shown in the % residential column, which really is indicating to us, because of the fact that this is a performance methodology that is combining a day matching that's used for residential and day matching for non-residential. As long as we understand what percentage of this overall data is from residential, we can kind of conclude what is for the non-residential component of that combined baseline methodology. In addition, the CVL scenario is just indicating, normally we would just see the DR event information or those hours in which there were bids for the CBL, and now we're expanding that to include all other hours within that day of event. So we need to see all the hours in the day of event as well as all of the preceding dates that were utilized and the data used to create the baseline. That's the extension of information that's already submitted, the extension of the data that's already submitted. And then again, the percent residential will provide us with the percentage of what is being submitted under the CBL that is coming from residential part of the combined methodology. So hopefully that helps a little bit more with this example.
Thank you for that. Do you have any questions now in the queue?
We do appear to have one question in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Nora from Olivine. I just want to make sure on the submission that if, say, there's an event at 8 to 9 p.m., that we'd only be doing the baselines for that day, right? Like we wouldn't be calculating a base value for 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. that corresponds to a different day. If I'm being clear there.
You're making me have to think. So, and it's specific to the base data, which is the calculated customer load baseline values that are used to derive the energy measurement.
And I believe they include the adjustment factor for the award hours and no adjustment factor for the non-award hours.
Yeah. So if we could go back a couple slides, I think it might be written out there, Hueda, base here. Mm-hmm. So it's the same, adjusted for intervals where there's TEE greater than 0 and unadjusted for all other hours.
Yeah. So, like there could be an event from 8 to 9. I just want to be clear that it would be fine if we just submitted that unadjusted data from 9 to midnight, not doing something from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. the next day that corresponds to a different day.
Remember, Nor, we're attempting to obtain additional information that will have us better understand the load point adjustment that's being utilized. And I'm going to kind of rely on you a little bit. I think we do extend it into those hours.
I think I raised this question when we were doing the residential.
Yeah. What was the resolution? What was the? Do you recall what we landed on?
Yeah, I can go back to what my notes on that, but I believe that we would not extend it into a different calendar day. But if that's not the case, then I can look at that again.
Again, I believe with these requirements, we would request that it be extended to the next day. Again, so we're understanding how the load point adjustment. So we have a good understanding based on both of this information as to how this adjustment factor is being calculated.
I think that there could be, and in theory, you could have you could have, like if you had an event late night and early morning, I'm not saying that's likely, you could have no way to distinguish what data is what. although it would, I guess he would probably use the same days, so maybe that wouldn't be such a big deal, but maybe that wouldn't be a problem. I'll think about that more.
Yeah, and I know I do see Christy Sonata from our DMM, and I'm just wondering if she has anything to comment on this specific question. And if she does, she can either put it in chat or come online. I think we can move to the next question, and then Nora will try and answer that more specifically.
We don't currently have any other questions in the queue.
Okay, we will note that last question and get clarification on that. But as it stands, we would expect it for those 4 hours preceding and after, which would include trade days, hours across trade days. We'll just leave it there for now, and we'll adjust that and clarify that more if that changes.
Thanks, Jill. I do see Christy. Thanks, Christy. You did type a chat. She goes, hi, Jill. Yes, I think we'd like to see charges before and after, even if it extends across a different trade date. Thanks, Christy. All right, operator, I guess we are a bit early. I don't know if Jill or Hawaii wants to add anything further. We're going to last check for any further questions in the queue, maybe before we conclude.
Yes, so once again, if you would like to ask a question, please press #2 on your telephone keypad. That's #2. Right now, we don't have any questions in the queue. I'll give it a moment.
And do you want to just reiterate? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to reiterate that tomorrow is the deadline for the May 1st adjustment factor request. So please send us your questions as soon as possible and send us those forms so that we can process them in time and for you to using it in May.
Thanks, Hawaii. And as noted, folks, we do encourage you to attend our recurring technical user group and release user group, or our rug and tug meetings, which are biweekly and can be found on our calendar, and the link is right there for you. And as mentioned, we are requesting comments on this discussion either through our city process or through the initiative comments at kaiso.com mailbox that you see right there on your screen by end of day May 6th. And with that, please have a very super day. And before we do end, just one quick check to see if any last questions.
We don't currently have any verbal questions in the queue. I'm not sure if you had gotten to the question from Christy Sonata in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we got Christy's chat. Thanks again, Christy, for that.
Yeah.
And then great.
Jimmy, I just want to clarify the comment here on the next steps. Today we went over really some of these upfront processes that need to occur, and then we provided you information on these new data submittal requirements. The reason why we're asking you to attend the further technical user groups and the release user group calls, this is where you get the detail on the changes and technical specifications as to how this new data, the percent residential, will be submitted via MRIS. So that is, I kind of wanted to highlight this that here, as well as highlight the fact that we are tracking this through our 2021 Summer Readiness Initiative. Although it was not part of the actual initiative, this was kind of a separate issue. Now that we recognize there are some new technical specifications to this effort, we've folded that in to that readiness initiative, specifically related to this detail of the implementation, which will affect this submission through our system, MRIS.
Thanks a lot for clarifying that, Jill.
Yeah, folks, we are have a question in the queue.
I'm sorry, we have a question?
Yeah, it does look like we have a last-minute question.
Great.
All right, caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Mike from CES again. So just given the timeline and the requirement for submittal tomorrow for May, is the appropriate system for questions through City, or is there somebody that we can just call tomorrow if we have just quick questions about the form?
For quick answers, you can send them to the PDR inbox, and we'll try our best to get back to you as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Wyatt. Thanks, Mike. That's pdr@kaiso.com. FYI for folks. All right. Well, thanks again, Jill, for that last clarification on the summer readiness implementation detail there. So, yeah, this is all getting ready for summer, folks, and we appreciate your time today. And thanks, Jill, Hawaii, and Elaine, and everyone else for your time. And have a great rest of your day, folks.
That concludes our conference. If you're a participant, you may now disconnect.